go, everybody. Welcome back to the Facebook Ad Kingdom podcast. We tackle some of the biggest questions surrounding Facebook ads and e-commerce and business and entrepreneurship and products and much more. There are a lot of things we don't talk about, and I'll tell you something that we don't do. We don't swear, so it's kosher.
Like
Kinda.
pickles.
Just like pickles. I'm your host, Morty Rapp, and with me is my co-host, my ho-coast, and my boss, Azriels, founder of Rats Pack Media. And today's podcast, we are talking about the 4 most influential people on Azriels' career. I want to jump right in. Azriel, you excited for today's pod?
Oh, yeah.
Awesome. All right, so let's jump into the first and most influential person I have here.
So before we go into the first one, I want to do an honorable mention. So one of my previous bosses, he had a lot of influence on me, both for good and for bad. So I find that it's worth, sort of before the list starts, we mention that. So I worked somewhere, and one of the things I really liked about working there was that there was a lot of, flexibility in the job description. If anyone's ever worked in a startup, a lot of times what happens in a startup is you end up with a lot of hats to wear, like a lot of different jobs. And I'm sure you've experienced that as well.
Never in my life.
Never in your life. So what was interesting about this job was that it was true that there were a lot of hats to wear, but you got to sort of choose the hats you wanted to wear versus like in most startups where you had a job and then you kind of like got a totally different job. Like, oh, no one's doing customer service. Oh, no one's doing the accounting. You should also do that. Oh, no one. But that's not what happened here. The person did a relatively good job of sort of like keeping you within the realm of what you were wanted to do. So I started off in the job like doing email marketing and then social media. And then social media sort of, became analytics, but within the realm of what was happening on online marketing. And then that shifted into ads. And so essentially what happened was because I had this flexibility to do what I wanted, like in a larger testing space than a typical job would allow, if you go to get a job at a corporate company, it's very unlikely you'll get to have your hands on a lot of bowls, but also get to like choose which ones and not like thrust it on you in the time that you're working there because no one else is doing it. Why don't you just also do this? Like I didn't also do graphic design. I didn't also do copywriting because those were things I didn't want to do and they weren't things I had interest in. So that's what and I think that flexibility to be able to see a lot of things in the realm of something I'm interested in. Like nowadays people come to me and they say, I want to get into this marketing space. And I say, well, what do you want to do within marketing? Do you want to do video creation? Do you want to do copywriting? Do you want to do community management? Do you want to do ad management? Do you want to do analytics? Do you want to do email marketing? And it just keeps going. And they're like, I don't even know there were so many things. And typically when you go and work at a company, you'll be given just one. You won't get to try all the other things. You'll just get to try one. And then what happens when you're doing that is that you don't actually get to learn the thing you actually like because you only get to experience one of these things. Like, for example, I know a company and all they do is community management. So you work for them and you don't get to experience ads. You don't get to experience email marketing. You don't get to experience it because that's the only thing that job offers. So you don't get to like try these other things. So that's one thing that has been very helpful. The other thing was that before this job, I don't think I would have ever considered even working on my own. But as we get into the first person, we'll explain why it ended up happening that I went and worked alone. Like I didn't have like in my body this desire to go and work for myself. But now with the introduction of the first person, I'll explain what that story was. But I wanted to first mention this experience I had working for some place that really allowed me to just test the waters. And I don't think I would ever found Facebook ads if not for that experience and gotten to actually spend real time doing it if not for that job.
I think that's a really good lesson just in general about any career path. Every single thing that happens in life, it's all a stepping stone towards getting to some place that's better. I think that's the lesson there. I think it's a lesson that we all, and we're still relatively young. We're not even in our 70s yet. So,
Not even. Look at that guy, Warren Buffett. That guy, he's just starting out. He'll
oh
make
my
it
god.
someday.
One day. I'm rooting for him. All right, I have here on my list number 1 a gentleman by the name of Gary V. Have you ever heard of him?
So my story with Gary Vaynerchuk's like pretty funny. So as I mentioned, I was working for this company, and there were many things that I believed strongly that disagreed with the way that the boss felt about things. And whenever I would present ideas, they were sort of just thrown to the wayside, like, that's not my idea. I don't know if you ever worked for a boss that I mean, I might be your first boss, but who knows? I might be throwing
I've had
myself under the bus
bosses.
here.
I've had bosses.
But basically, it's like a my way or the highway sort of thought process, and it's like, no, you can't do any other things unless I think of it, and then you end up like having a workplace that's not so great to work in because you have these ideas, and you probably even know better than the boss about like boots on the ground, what's actually going on. And when you present any ideas, they're just sort of been like, absolutely not. That's a terrible idea. I didn't think of it. And you're just like, well, how do I proceed here? So essentially, what happened was I decided I wanted to get on Twitter. So I started a Twitter account in 2004, like late 2014,
For
very
yourself or
late.
for the company?
No, for myself. I just
Okay.
started on my own a Twitter account. No, it didn't attach any other things. Back then I didn't have any followings any place else. Not that I could have like grown it or leveraged it or something. And I just like started getting active on Twitter. So when you first start out, you just like start following random pages just to sort of like, see what's out there. And I ended up following Inc., the publication, and they started publishing these videos every couple of days. Check out Ask Gary V3, Ask Gary V4, Ask Gary V5. So by the time I'm seeing like episode 7, 8, 9, I'm just like, I guess I should watch this guy. If this big company, Inc., is posting every 5 days about this guy, I guess I should watch. I didn't know who he was before, that period, maybe like January, February of 2020, 2015. And I started watching the content. What was amazing to me was that all of like my strong beliefs were exactly what he spoke about in these very early episodes of the Ask Gary V show. And so I basically now had this ammunition to come back to my boss and say, look, you might not agree with this idea, but here's a guy. He has a company that's a relatively large size. Now it's enormous. But back then, 2015, it was like that one office in New York with, the Jets as his one client or something. And he was, yelling and screaming about all these things. My boss still wasn't interested. But what that gave me was the belief that I knew something others didn't know. And that was really what happened in 2015 when I said, I know this big secret, Facebook ads that works so well and just does such a great job, and no one else knows. And the only people that like these super successful people that know, they're the ones talking about it already. But most of the world doesn't know this secret. And that's really what led me to believe that it's worth it for me to go and start a company just to focus on this one thing, to do Facebook ads. And it was really
Well,
only seeing someone that had just one was relatively successful. Now he's even more successful and more well known than then. But back then, there was no one in my life that knew about this thing. If you go and look around in 2015, the number of like there was one guy, his name was John Loomer, and he still posts actively. He's really great. I met him a couple times in person. He's really a fantastic person. And he was the only one writing about Facebook ads in 2014, 15. And that was it. Like that was all of the people that you could read about. So to find someone who had a following, was known, and believed the same sort of ideas that I believed gave me the conviction to actually step out and take a risk. What happened was I actually commented on one of those Inc. posts all those years ago, and I wrote this. Maybe we'll find the link for the show notes. But it was like, this crazy guy Gary V. Thanks for introducing him to me. He has such amazing ideas, but I think he's a nutcase. Like that's what I wrote, something like that. And 5 seconds later, I get a response from Gary V. It's just like a series of emojis. And that was the only communication I ever had with him. It's been over almost a decade now. And in all of these years, the only response I've ever had from anything I've ever done with Gary Vaynerchuk, I've written blog posts about it, all this stuff. That's the only reply I've ever gotten, and I just responded exactly what I mean. Like that's like this like personifies exactly like Gary Vaynerchuk. He's within 10 seconds of someone commenting about him, he responds, but his response is like this like gibberish, series of emojis. And then fast forward to late 2015, I had already started my company July 1st, 2015, and he started talking about the importance of video and Snapchat. And so in 2015, literally like the last week of 2015, I decided my New Year's resolution for 2016 was going to be to start making video content. And between 2016 and 2018, I published about 1,200 pieces of content that are still all available. Like between you, they're not everything's still available because the main platform I use is called Whale, which is now since gone. But most of the videos are available between YouTube and my old Facebook page, which is we're still publishing on. And it really was only because I had a belief, but I needed someone in the world that also believed that thing for me to really have that push. Like you imagine you go to your wife and you just tell your wife like, okay, I'm going to leave this job that's been paying all our bills. And also at the time she was pregnant. And also at the time I just finished like the army and she was like in school. And I just said to her, like, I have this belief that this is going to make me a ton of money and I'm going to do this. And no one else in the whole world believes me. Right? Except this one crazy guy on the internet. And so I have to like shout out to my wife because, that's already like a crazy thing for her to have stood behind, all of this crazy. I'm a little on the nut side, but that was a pretty crazy thing. And she definitely didn't sign up for, those 18 months of, I think I made $2,000 in total, maybe to $5,000 or something. But it really I had an idea, but the thing that got me to the push that actually got me was that there was someone more successful that I could look up to and say, oh, they also believe this thing that's worth going all in on. And that's really what a mentor is. Like, even though like literally it's been a decade, I've never met Gary Vaynerchuk. I've never spoken to him on the phone. The only correspondence we ever had was that single one tweet back in 2015. And yet I was able to say, look at all these things he's achieved. And he thinks the same way I do. I should go and try to achieve this amazing
I love
thing.
it.
And that's it. Like literally like most of my business success, all of the times I've been on stage, my courses, all of that is because of the fact that I spent years making content. Here we are again. I did take a long break between 2018 and 2024, but we're here again making video content, publishing for 3-4 times a week. And that's what built my whole business. And we're back at it again. And so
going
really
strong.
The thanks goes to Gary Vaynerchuk for sort of being that person to look up to and say like, this idea is crazy, but it just might work.
I think that's crazy. And Gary, if you're listening to this podcast, I just want you to understand it's your fault that Azriel quit his job and became an entrepreneur. So all the blessings that come with that, you're the influence. What I also like about having a mentor in general, even someone who you don't have a relationship with, is it gives you a North Star. You're always looking ahead. It's not about now at all. Now is I know the actions I need to take, but there's something that there's a goal I'm going towards. And that shifts. As an entrepreneur, that shifts all the time as you grow in your career. So that's something cool. I have here another one. Number 2 on the list of 4 is a man by the name of Dennis Yu. Tell us about who that is.
So I met Dennis Yu. So now we have to we set the stage here. So I finally started making video content. I started posting all these things. And I realized I live on the other side of the earth compared to where all the people I want to meet are. So back then in 2016, 17, I'm like, how am I going to meet these people? And I heard about a little event. Actually, I have to give a little shout out to Yoel Israel. Yoel Israel told me about this event because he started running, I believe, either the Google ads or the SEO for this company back then, 2016, 17. And there was there's an event called the Social Media Marketing World. And it was the biggest event for social media marketers. Like, hey, that's me. I'm a social media marketer. I should go to this event. So I actually bought a ticket and I bought a flight and I got a hotel room. And you have to imagine, back then, I really wasn't making very much money in 2017. This is a very large investment. I have to imagine $7,000+ for this sort of thing. And I got on a plane and I flew to America, and I knew Zero people. Zero people. And I walk into this crowd the night before the event, and I just start walking up to people, and I'm like, hey, I recognize that guy who's the face of the company, social media marketing world. I just come and start talking with him, and he ends up introducing me over that evening to quite a lot of people that I'm still very close with, one of them being Dennis Yu. Dennis Yu has been in the space much longer than me, doing every type of ad you could imagine. Even before ads, he's been around for quite a while. And I ended up meeting him briefly. We spoke for a second there. But then, thanks to that event in March, I met a guy whose name is Tyler Anderson, another shout out. And he brought me to speak in San Diego just a few months later in June. And it was my first speaking gig connected to Facebook ads. The first time I had ever publicly speaking. This was, if I remember, June 30th is known as Social Media Day. And he hosts an event every year, Social Media Day San Diego. If anyone's in San Diego in June of, I guess, a whole year from now, you should for sure go. He's still doing it every year. And he invited me to speak. And now, why was I invited to speak? Because of the fact that I had all these videos online. So he ended up introducing, like he told his wife about my content. She spent all night, one night, watching hundreds of videos that I had. And that is what led him to invite me to speak. And I get on stage and I look like I get there that morning, June 30th, 2017. And I noticed the person directly after me speaking is Dennis Yu, right?
Crazy.
So we're both speaking about Facebook ads, one right after the other. And I also know that my approach is different than his approach still today, how we approach Facebook ads. And I get up on stage and I give a speech. And after his speech, we end up meeting in the hallway. And so Dennis at the time had two assistants that were there. He has a much larger, company, but these were like the two that he had brought with him. And he mentioned to me that he really liked the way I approach ads. It's from a more analytical point of view, like because of my background in math. So I approach it very much. And we literally, our last podcast was the very mathematical approach that I take to Facebook ads. And he said, I really like it. I want to hire you for a couple of hours because I just like your approach. It's different than mine. I'd love to learn. He said, how much do you charge? At the time, my response was $250 an hour. And I was very proud of that number. And he's like, are you serious? And I'm like, yeah. He's like, that's it? And I'm like, what are you talking about? He said, see, this guy, we hired him 7-8 months ago. So he charges $250 an hour. And this guy over here, we charge per hour for him $500. And my hourly rate is $2,000. So if you're telling me that you are only $250, can I buy every hour you have? Forever. Just every hour. I will just pay out right now for the rest of your career, $250. I'm getting such a discount. And I'm just standing there going what's happening right now? Because in my last job, I made a comment at the time, back when I was working in 2014, and I said, I'm going to start on my own. I'm going to charge $100. And the immediate response was, no one's going to pay you. What do you know? $100 an hour. And so to go from 2015 to 2017, one person's saying $100, that's way too much money. No one would ever pay you that. To $250, can I buy every hour you'll ever have? That perspective shift in that moment was insane, right? You imagine, what am I thinking in my life that I'm only charging $250? I have this knowledge, this secret sauce. And that has the power to influence. So nowadays I charge considerably more than $250 an hour all these years later. And when I tell people my price, their response is, you're more than my lawyer. And I say, yeah, because I make you more money per hour than your lawyer does. And
simple as that.
and they say, great, where can I sign? So that perspective, I don't think I would have gotten that perspective without that conversation. And that's, to me, to be able to look and say, the way Gary Vaynerchuk was the mentor that I looked up to, and I said, this person is achieving good things and thinks the same way as me. That gives me the courage to go do that. This realization that I had was the amount of impact that I could have is so much bigger than I think it is. If I'm only charging $250 an hour, I'm doing something wrong. because of just how great the skill set is, just how powerful the skill set could be. And then, since 2017, like that changes your approach about everything, right? So
Yep.
now you just imagine you're on a sales call and you want to tell someone about your thing, and you feel like, I don't really love to talk about like how great and amazing I am, like a little bit of humbleness. I'm not sure what the right word is. Like
Humility.
humility. That's the word. Thank you. Thesaurus. Add that to your job resume.
No, this isn't a startup. I only wear one hat.
so just to be able to, like, the fear of being of coming up and saying I'm really great at this skill, but then realizing that no, you as the person on the sales side of the conversation is actually something that you're providing such an amazing opportunity for the buyer that it's their loss for not being told. Like, just so you understand, this opportunity means hundreds of millions of dollars, growth in your business, like scalability, help, be like all of these things. And if you don't take this action, like the opportunity in your business is so much smaller. And so that mind shift, there's a word there that I'm lacking. Mind shift, whatever.
Mindset
The shift
shift.
in my set, that was a word. Mindset shift in that moment made me realize just how valuable my skill really was. Even within the world of Facebook advertisers, it's such a different approach. Even today, the way I approach Facebook ads is different than most advertisers. And that skill is very important to businesses, to the point where they should be wanting to pay thousands and thousands of dollars to be able to leverage that thing. And that's really like a very big shift in my life, that to be able to have been taught that lesson relatively early in my career was important. I think that everyone that has, a valuable skill and is hiding it from the world, you should just know that that is a loss, not just for you, but for people that would love to spend the money to learn that skill. And before we jump to the third person, I want to actually add a story for someone else. Back in 2017, I hadn't really invested much in coaching. And I think this is 2018. And I met someone whose name is Kamanzi Constable. I'm still very close with now. And at the time, he was teaching a course on how to get published in newsletters, like in big online publishers. And at the time, I didn't have any knowledge on how to do this. And I think maybe he was charging $500. Now he charges way more, and I was lucky to have been able to, to pay for it back then. But back then he was charging $500, and he was going to give a 4-hour class, like one-on-one over 4 weeks, 1 hour a week, to teach you the basics on how to get published in online publications. And I paid the money, and we did the course. And the amount of knowledge I learned in that time, for very, very little, is something that I still know how to do today, to be able to leverage getting in online publications, of which I've been in many publications over the years. But that skill is something I would never have just learned on my own. It's not something that you just intuitively would have figured out. And that was really a turning point to just say, like, there are people with knowledge in the world that can teach you something that you will never know how to do without them. And why try to learn for a year guessing and failing miserably when I could pay to skip the line? And that was like a really interesting shift, to just say, there's knowledge that exists in the world, and if I can pay someone to learn it, I can dramatically up level my skill by just paying for a course, by just paying for a mentorship, by just paying for a coaching. And I've since spent like just shy of $100,000 over the years on actual coaching, but also on books. I read a ton of books, and the next person on this list is actually a person I never corresponded with at all, but I read his unbelievable book.
All right. Well, let's go into the third one. And I just want to say, just as a quick summary, that what Dennis Yu taught you is what we call perceived value. Now, oftentimes we suffer from our own internal walls that really that don't allow us to level up because we're too scared how people look at it. Maybe we don't really believe our value is that big. Maybe we believe there's so many better, more successful people. Who am I? And even if we talk about charging, who am I to charge this amount of money? Look at these other people. They're demigods at this point,
Right.
And then you realize, you know what? But those people are charging so much more. Even if I can say I'm a quarter of their value, I'm still up here. It's a big jump. And I think
For
a lot of
sure.
entrepreneurs have a hard time getting through that. And when they do, it really does. It skyrockets their career. Let's go into the third person here. I have a name, Will Gudara. Who is that, and why is he important to you?
Yeah. So, as I mentioned, I read like a ton of books. I read a ton of books. And the idea behind it is just to be able to soak up the knowledge of someone that's ahead of you. And honestly, for $20, like you can't really get a better, cost. There are coaches that I paid that charge $10,000+ for coaching, and they've spent a year putting a book together that you could get all the same knowledge that they're selling for thousands and thousands of dollars from a $20 book. So this guy Will wrote a book that is to me one of the best business books I've read, called Unreasonable Hospitality. And in that book, he really personifies the idea behind the concept of start with why. So anyone who's familiar with the very famous TED Talk by Simon Sinek, Start with Why, that the concept is, if you want to draw attention to your business, you need to focus not on what it is that I do. I serve vegetables, right? Like, you want a fast food McDonald's? No, we serve healthy McDonald's, right? So that's the what I do. But the idea behind why I do it is, I want to enable the everyday person for a reasonable price to get healthy food rather than buying unhealthy food. And so that's the why behind Sweet Greens, this massive 100+ franchise company. That's the why behind them. So if I focus, I sell lettuce for a premium in a box. That's the what I do, and that doesn't sell as well. Like in the book that Start With Why, he compares Dell computers or Compaq computer, which has since gone out of business, to the way that Apple markets. Compaq was very interested in telling you about the number of gigs and the RAM and the size of the screen, and Apple was for the rebels, right? It was very much why we do this thing. And so the book, Unreasonable Hospitality, was the same concept, which is, I can serve a delicious meal, and I could get the best chefs on earth to produce for you the best food you've ever had. But if the reasoning behind why I'm doing it is to give you a life-altering meal, I can't just stop at the food. I have to figure out how to make the entire experience, from the minute that you book the time for your dinner to even picking out, getting your coat from the coat room, like every part of the experience was thought through. Like, just some ideas in the book that he mentioned was, you've booked a tomorrow night 8 p.m. at some restaurant. The maitre d' for tomorrow is going to call you and say, hey, this is Mary. I'm just very excited to confirm your reservation for tomorrow at 8 p.m. They've confirmed the reservation. And then when you walk through the door, they don't say, what's your name? They go, Gary? What? Oh, it's so great to see you. It's Mary. We spoke yesterday. And already just that initial awkwardness of waiting at a restaurant, which they made a whole Jerry Seinfeld episode about, just that awkwardness of waiting at the Chinese restaurant, that is gone, right? So now you walk in and there's this smiling face of someone you actually know, and that already puts you in a very different mood. Then you check your jacket and you walk to the table, and as you're walking to the table, they ask you what sort of water you want. Still, tap, bottled,
Sparkling.
seltzer. You tell them, and as you're walking to the table, they've somehow already signaled to the other side of the room to the busboy to make sure to bring your water, so that literally moments from when you sit down, you've already been brought water. And then even the way they present the check and the way they get your coat And the way, like, everything about the evening is this concept of unreasonability, I guess, is just being unreasonable. And it reminds me of a podcast that I listened to between the CEO of Airbnb and the founder of LinkedIn, where Brian from Airbnb mentioned this tactic that he has, which is he had very early on in the Airbnb experience, they had everyone sit down in a room, all the like execs from the company, and he said, we have a rating system on our website, and we ask everyone to rate each of their stays from 1 to 5 stars. And so, can you just tell me, like, walk me through what the average 3-star experience looks like? Like, we know that we're not going to have every experience is not going to be a 5-star experience, but we really need to understand, what does that experience look like? So everyone starts off by saying, well, 3 is an average experience. It was a little annoying to get the key because the person wasn't so, easy to get a hold of, but the location of it was exactly where it needed to be. And, it was clean. It did like the basics. She's okay. So tell me what a 2 looks like. Well, a 2 is like, I get to this place and it's dirty and there's no towels and the guy won't answer the phone and I can't find the Wi-Fi password and it's just like really frustrating. He's like, okay, so what's a 1? A 1, wow. A 1 is just like, it's terrible. It's not even in the place I thought it was. There's cockroaches everywhere. It took me an hour and a half to get in touch with the guy to get the key because I couldn't find how to get into the place. And it was horrible. Like, I never want to experience this again. I said, okay, fine. What's a 4? Well, a 4, it's clean. There's towels. It's where it's at. Everything I expect out of a hotel experience. So what's a 5? A 5 is you get there and the guy, whether or not you like to be greeted by people, is a personality thing. But the guy's there. He's there. He has you the key. You get in right away. He tells you that he's already looked through. He's already made for you a list of all the best restaurants in town and all the activities you could do. And it's sitting on the table with the Wi-Fi password available, nice fluffy towels on the beds, all of the stuff, chocolates on the pillows. That's a 5. And he said, interesting. Can you tell me what a 10-star review looks like? And so now what they have to picture is just something you never expect, right? Like a 5-star is everything you could expect. It's the reasonable hospitality. But now when you go to a 10-star, it's off the charts. Imagine you show up and there's a Michelin star restaurant chef standing there ready to take your order. And they're like they've already planned your evening out. And tomorrow they heard you like surfing, so they've already waxed your surfboard and told you the 3 best places to go surfing. And then he says, wow, like, okay, that's a 10-star. It's just so amazing. What's a 15-star? And so now it forces you to just believe the unbelievable, the unreasonable. And literally what his answer is, Elon Musk is standing there with 2 tickets to Mars. You're ready to go. And it's just like this experience you never think could be possible. And that's what this book really shows you. It's just this idea behind, what if I, as a business owner, could present to a client, to a customer, to a patient, to whatever it is, this experience that everyone else would think is unreasonable. And that is what he achieved with his restaurants and what he talks about in the book. And it's really what Start With Why is all about. It's about, if I'm able to give over to the customer an experience that's just, it's beyond the number of gigs on the computer. It's beyond the size of the screen. It's beyond the swipe to unlock feature. It's about improving my overall experience. It's about for the rebels, And that lesson is something that's so important as a business owner to just think about whenever you can. What would be that 10-star experience? And so I was able to pay like $17 for that book for a lesson that is just, it's unreasonable. It's the concept of, can I make this experience so good that my customers are begging to come back for more?
Yeah. Yeah, totally. And that's it doesn't really matter if you're a service or a product. The concept it's always the same. It's what do people expect, and what can we give them that is just can blow them out of the water. On a service provider perspective, I imagine some clients say, you know what, I'm going to take a risk. It's always a risk when you hire a Facebook ads guy, a marketer, because no one can promise anything. And then you get, they expect, all right, within the first month, I'll be getting at least, 2 ROAS. I don't know.
Right.
You're
Just
like, oh, I
stuff.
did 9. You're like, what the heck? Oh yeah. Also, here's a marketing strategy for the next 4 months that you could implement right now because of certain things that I noticed. Like
Here's 4
what?
tools your site's not using that could improve your conversion rate and your average cart value. Did you think about adding abandoned cart sequences to SMS? Just like all of a sudden, it's not just about the ads. It's about the whole overall marketing. All of a sudden, my business is making an extra $500,000 a month that I wasn't expecting from this. Like, all I'm paying this guy is, wow, what a deal I had. And really, like, the progression of why we're speaking about these people in these specific people is because really that's like these additional levels of business. And
Yeah.
I'm going to let you introduce the fourth person because it's actually it's an interesting switch from the last 3 or 4 that we mentioned.
Okay, well, here's
there.
number 4. Here's number 4, and I guess we'll call it layer number 4 if we want. You have the CEOs of Energy Transfer. I don't even know who that is. So
let's start off with back in 2020. I have a very good friend, Nadav Reese, who lives around here. Maybe he's listening to this podcast. Who knows? And he was in a group where every month they would pick people to present a new stock purchase opportunity, put together a thesis about why you believe this stock pick is worthwhile. And Nadav wrote about his favorite company, Energy Transfer, which is ET on the stock market. And he put together this whole paper and he sent it in to be reviewed and was rejected. And I went and read this paper that he put together. And I'm like, this is an unbelievable business. So just for those who don't know, Energy Transfer today is the single largest operator of the movement of gasoline around America. So they pump their gas from anywhere around the world. You imagine Sunoco and Exxon Mobil, all these big companies. They gather their oils from around the world, and now they bring it to America. Where are they arriving? The Boston Harbor, Miami, California. But how does that gas get to Idaho? How does it get to Montana? How does it get to, inland America, Kansas? How does it get to these places? And there's a few options. Obviously, option 1 is not a boat. You cannot take a boat, one of these giant oil, rigs, these giant things, and move them through like the Mississippi River. Like, that's not an option for these boats. So for years, they move them through truck, but that's like super expensive. And you have to imagine how many trucks you need. So they put together pipelines. And so you literally come to the shore of Chicago, wherever it is, you dump your gasoline into their pump, they push a button, and it moves that gasoline to wherever it is you need it in America. And they are the single largest mover of oils in America. There isn't
Amazing.
a better option than Energy Transfer.
Are they a monopoly?
It is not a monopoly. There are other companies in the space that do the same thing. For example, they don't do storage. It's not very economical to store your gasoline in the pipes. So there's other companies that do storage. And there's other companies that do other types of moving. You want to do on railroad. I don't know, however else you could move things. You imagine that people are willing to pay. I'm sure there's providers that are willing to do it. So one of the things about Energy Transfer that I like is that they believe that their revenues should go back to their investors. So they pay a very large dividend every year. So today, with the stock price of, obviously, it's going to change tomorrow anyways, but it's sitting somewhere around $16. Right now, $15.58 with a yearly dividend payment of 8.22%. So that means that you could right now put money into this publicly traded company, and every single year you will get paid 8.22% yield guaranteed on your money until the business goes out of business. And they're the single largest operator. They have millions and millions of dollars in extra in cash. And the majority of their CEOs, like their C-suite people, have enormous amounts of stock in the company. Why is that important? And why is that the final mentor?
I don't know, because I'm gonna go and buy some of that stock right after this conversation.
I'll tell you the story is that I actually bought the stock in March of 2020. If everyone remembers, it was right around COVID, but an additional thing happened during that time, which is that the oil prices went down to $0.
Wow.
And so at that time, there was this crash in the oil market. All of the major gas companies went down in price. All of these, the ExxonMobil, Sunoco, BP, all of them, enormous drop in price, combining this $0 oil per barrel plus COVID's drop. And ET, which is not an oil company, they are a transportation company, they went down with it. And I was actually able to buy shares in the company for $3.35.
Amazing.
And back then, the yield on it was like 20 something percent. Today, the money I invested back in 2020 yields me 40% a year on that initial investment of like, I don't know, $3,000 to $4,000 or something. So every single year I'm paid like $1,200 to $1,500 just for owning the shares. But what's
why
crazy,
are they important?
the craziness is that the CEO owns so much money in shares that he's paid a yearly dividend of something like $10 to $15 million for just owning the shares. Meaning if he were to retire tomorrow and he wasn't getting his stock options and he wasn't getting his yearly salary and he wasn't getting all of the perks that go along with being the CEO of a multi-billion-dollar publicly traded company, he would still every single day get paid, not every day, quarterly get paid millions of dollars to be able to, for just buying into the belief of this growing company. And that's the same. There's a story with Steve Ballmer, if I'm pronouncing that name right. So Steve was a very early employee to Microsoft.
Right.
And he was, I think, one of the first people on the sales team. And he was dealing with Bill Gates initially to come up with his contract. And what he wanted as part of his contract was 10% ownership of Microsoft. And when the company went public, I think I don't think he's worked there in something like 30 something years. And two, I'm not sure he ever was actually CEO of the company.
He was not.
I have to confirm that if he was or was not. But
I don't think he was.
Because he made that deal with Bill Gates all those years ago, he's paid something like $1 billion in yearly dividend payments from his Microsoft shares. So not including the value of his shares, not including the growth of the shares, just the dividend payments of the number of shares he owns pays him something like $997 million a year. And that realization that there are opportunities, one, that are enormously larger than something I've ever even considered. Would you have thought the movement of gasoline would be valued at quite literally today $53 billion? And the person who came up with the idea could literally retire today and get paid $10 million a year for the rest of however long gasoline is in use, simply because he had an idea that was just so extraordinary and he enabled it to happen. And he happens to be the CEO. Meaning, again, he's getting compensated very well beyond that. I think in the end, he makes something like $25 million a year in total, salary and options. But just the value of his shares is just that powerful that he could retire and never have to work his entire lifetime. Like we're talking about, he's earning generational wealth every year from the dividends of his investment. So that makes me realize something that is beyond what I'm working on, meaning what I'm actively working on day to day, and working on bringing unreasonable expectations to my clients' Facebook ads, is what is that thing that's just such a powerful idea, so beyond what other people are working on, like an Elon Musk save civilization, SpaceX and Tesla idea that's made him the wealthiest man on earth because of that concept. That is just like the fire underneath me. That is what is possible to achieve. That's just so grand, so, unreasonable, that it's worth it to keep working on something bigger. And that's, again, I've never had a conversation with the CEOs of ET. I've never sat in a board meeting. I've never whatever, but just that idea that I was able to join in a company for maybe $3,000 or something, and now I'm along for the ride for this extraordinary, company. And so that's the next thing. The next mentor level is work on concepts that are just the future of whatever. And it happens to be, I've invested in funds that one of my very small, I put like $1,000 or something into Figure AI, which is a public, not yet public, hopefully soon publicly traded company that's building robots. A company that, works on defense contracts to build software behind drone mapping and stuff like that. Like these sort of tech companies that are building something that's just so beyond what you'd think that is going to be the future. And businesses that are, working on building AI. I'm friendly with a company that, is worth, they sold for $100 million. Like literally, like companies that are leveraging the features of tomorrow to leverage them today for business is a concept I had never thought about before learning about these big companies. And that's the next, the next big thing. What is it? The answer is I don't even know what the thing is yet, but I just know that out there in the world are things that are possible that no one ever thought of before. That's such a big concept that literally can revolutionize. And the overnight success, and I know that overnight isn't, a day, but 10 years.
It's a decade,
10, 15 years. It is what's possible to literally not only change your life and bring value to you, but also to the world around you that is generationally enhancing the world. And so that's
there's a double lesson there. There's this lesson of investing in yourself in the sense that, like, if I believe that what I'm doing is super valuable, I want to make sure that not only am I owning a part of that, or I'm owning like a major source of whatever this future dividend is going to be. And then there's a secondary idea that there are things that are, bigger than I can ever believe. And just to try to, when you imagine and you view the world through that lens, in some ways you almost have access to it that most people who, either look down or just look straight ahead, and they're not looking past the grand vision. You have access to that. And it's a mindset, like you said. It's a great mindset to have.
And so that's actually, it's actually changed my investing. So one, I very much invest heavily in my business, but two, what I like to look for in investments is a business owner, business leaders that are working on that one are just that good, and two are working on something that's just that great. Like it's just
right.
A concept that's just such a high quality idea, and that's the winning concept. Meaning, will every winning idea win? No. Will every winning team win? No. But the idea of betting on that alignment of great leader and great idea is what I want to keep betting on. And so I'm looking for these opportunities to jump in on that overlap.
Amazing.
And
Amazing.
That's the next big jump for me.
Ladies and gentlemen, we hope you enjoyed this pod. We hope you took some inspiration. So if anybody wants to look into these people and see if they can maybe find inspiration in them, the list is Gary V, Dennis Yu, Will Gudara, and the CEOs of Energy Transfer. That is the list. And we mentioned a whole bunch of honorable mentions throughout the pod as well. Azriel, thank you for your time today. If you have any ideas or requests, please send us in the comments. Shoot me an email if you'd like as well.
And if
And
you're looking for Facebook ad management, you should message Morty.
you should, because we're going to make you a lot of money. I don't understand why.
Do you hate
Why would
money?
you say no to that? Do you hate money? I was going to make a political joke, and then I shut myself.
Wise.
I wasn't going to.
Wise.
Everyone likes money. All right. Till next time.
Peace.
Like and subscribe. Bye-bye.